Salutations, nerds. I'm Rick Y, the wise guy. And today is December 1st, 2024, and in this I'm going to explore more of the grift that Donald Trump has delivered to his own supporters. Instead of draining the swamp, it appears that he's dredging it directly into the living rooms of his fan base. So if you dig my content, do me a solid and like, share, and subscribe. It goes a long way to getting the good word out to everybody who needs to hear it. Yes, America, seems that we're just about to begin round two. What appears to be Donald Trump manipulating his followers and the American people by selling them a false bill of goods. You see, during his initial rise to power and fame in 2015, he was able to harness the anger and resentment of a lot of people. He even touched the nerves of people who had been so disillusioned from politics and government that they were actually willing to lash out instead of maintaining any status quo. He brought up the real problem of insider corruption in politics. He spoke on the pay-to-play system that excluded the common man like the average American worker in place of wealthy donor-class elite who bend the law in ways that eventually end up just making themselves richer. He was a populist candidate who tapped into a concern that had been brewing in the minds of American voters. The liberal side of America also had that in the form of Bernie Sanders. And he was forcefully pushed out of the way to appease the more established political leaders like Clinton, which took a big portion of a highly motivated voter bloc and turned it against the establishment that it was trying to maintain. And what these voters saw in Trump was an anti-establishment political firebrand who was trying to dismantle that system that had left so many of these voters in the dark. He had taken advantage of an anti-establishment movement that had gained traction, and then he took the anti-establishment forces in the conservative base that have always been there. He also then manifested the lobbyists, status quo establishment politicians, and pay-to-play government employees, and he wrapped them under this umbrella term, the swamp. And he dubbed them swamp creatures. Regardless of your personal position on him, this proved to be a strategically positive move to the chagrin of many of us. I remember being in Colorado with my wife at the time and nobody in the car. We could even think of any words to say. We knew then that he had played his supporters for fools, and we were right. He filled his cabinet and advisory positions with people who were loyal simps to his every whim. The turnover of individuals who didn't demonstrate enough loyalty was head-spinning. In his own personal circle, what came of this was a son-in-law who got billions from the Saudi crown prince, nobody knows why, federal departments that were filled with MAGA sycophants instead of subject matter experts, and you also had folks who just didn't really seem to fit bills when it came to the roles that they were put in charge of. This set up a self-serving system, and it's been reported that it had upwards of like 3,700 problematic conflicts of interest. He never divested his interest properly, and while president, made 550 visits to his own properties and charged all of the staffers, officials, and Secret Service personnel who were close to him at all times. So he was therefore charging the government, his tax-paying supporters, so that he could have a record excess of executive golf course trips. He then incentivized foreign dignitaries to also stay at his residence in Washington, D.C., filling his coffers with more money, all while keeping this MAGA cult under the impression that he was foregoing his presidential paycheck out of the kindness of his widow heart. When in reality, he was raking in millions through the back door, away from a lot of his supporters' prying eyes. When the stories did get through the cracks, his crack propaganda parade was able to convince many not to believe their lying eyes. He gaslit them, and I expect nothing less from him in the near future because he somehow manipulated them into thinking he was again there to go after perceived corruption. I hope you're ready for this because currently there's no shortage of batshit nominations for cabinet positions. His vice president is a hedge fund manager who screwed over much of poor Appalachia. His White House chief of staff, Susie Wiles, is a lobbyist for 42 different clients, to include a tobacco company. His attorney general pick is known by many in Florida legal circles as the most corrupt attorney general in the state of Florida, and that's saying something. But this decision only came after his first choice, an alleged statutory child abuser and human trafficker, Matt Gaetz, decided to drop out. Deputy Attorney General is going to go to Trump's personal attorney. Some may consider this a tiny conflict of interest given the legal entanglements the president is still tied up in. An entirely new office that will go to slash funding to poor Americans is going to be led by two billionaires, openly warning the poor Americans that they're just going to have to hurt a little more financially so that they can pass tax breaks and credits to themselves and other rich donors. The director for Office of Management and Budget is going to be led by an architect for Project 2025. Defense Secretary is going to a Fox News face, Pete Hegseth. Director of National Intelligence, Russian intel asset, and propaganda mouthpiece, Tulsi Gabbard. Secretary for the Department of Education, a department he plans on dismantling, is going to be led by Linda McMahon of World Wrestling Entertainment fame. And now, more recently, inviting Florida business bozo and Trump campaign mega donor John Phelan to be the Secretary of the Navy. This man has no experience in the military. He has no experience in the Navy. He has no experience in the Department of Transportation. This man is another art collecting hedge fund manager and investor who simply bought his way into one of the most powerful positions on earth when he couldn't tell his port from a hole in the ground, if you catch my drift. And this new ass chapper is only just a small beetle on the dung heap that are the long list of cabinet decisions that Trump has made over the past few days. Dr. Oz, as the administrator for Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services, FBI director is going to be Kash Patel. Stephen Chung is going to be the White House communications director. And get this, the U.S. ambassador to France is going to be Jared Kushner's real estate father, Charles Kushner, for crying out loud. This is draining the swamp? Whew. I have a feeling the Senate nomination hearings are going to be, if nothing else, a bonkers ride that I don't look forward to. But I do look forward to covering because we got to hold these people's feet to the fire. These are admittedly some of the most confusing picks for these positions that I'm aware of. And instead of cleaning up corruption he swore to his supporters that he would get rid of, Trump seems poised and ready to let the gators and swamp critters take the wheel. And it will probably be stressful over the coming months, but we got to keep our cool. We got to stay engaged, and we got to stay decent. Until next time, keep your galoshes nearby because I have a feeling we're going to be slogging through some thick mud here soon.